Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Swinnerton. I'm the Associate Director with the Boston Informatics Group and Boston VA Informatics Center. And so I will be kind of giving a presentation on the tool that we've built for FORTE, and which is part of our app called MPACT. And so before kind of demoing the app specifically, I wanted to give you all a little bit of a background around who we are as a team and what kind of work we do. And so the Boston Informatics Group is a team of software engineers and data scientists building applications to facilitate the learning healthcare system. Our goal is to develop tools that improve the clinical workflow and subsequently patient health outcomes. And so what specifically does that look like is we provide informatics support to multiple VA programs, and specifically we build and maintain a suite of web applications collectively known as Enthrall, and a subset of that is known as oncology apps that are aimed at improving the clinical workflow. Our focus is largely on oncology and specifically oncology clinical trial management. Our applications are all hosted within VA servers and covered by an ATO. So we have all of our regulatory things in a row, so you can trust that the data you see is well protected and well maintained. And you can see our portfolio here at our website, enthrall.va.gov, and then specifically our oncology apps, the same base URL with oncology apps. And so this is what our website looks like. And I'm going to talk about one of our apps, which the FORTE tool was built into, and that is called MPACT, or more colloquially known as trial matching. MPACT stands for Matching Patients to Accelerate Clinical Trials. And in our app, we have 36 active trials that are covering 47 different sites. And we just wanted to give a little bit of information around the background and purpose of the app overall before diving into what we've built for FORTE specifically. So the kind of goal of this app is to improve screening efficiency for research coordinators. We want to enable coordinators to share and coordinate screening tasks among multiple coordinators, integrate patient appointment information, and do all of this with an emphasis on sensitivity over specificity. And I'll come back to that as I talk a little bit more of how we've built this specifically for FORTE. And we also wanted a tool that put everything together in one place. So the clinical data, study criteria, patient recruitment status, all together in one convenient location. And we wanted to enable status and history tracking on a patient level, and also to allow for enrollment tracking across trials and cross sites. So specifically, there are three main workflows that you can kind of do within MPACT, and I will talk about how all of these work for FORTE. So the first overall workflow is to generate your pre-screening list, then would be to screen your patients, and then 3 would be to track patients through the screening process. So I'll go through workflow 1, and so this is the part of generating a pre-screening list for FORTE. And so there's kind of 2 main pathways that patients may end up in our application for FORTE. So the first pathway is identifying patients who've had a prior colonoscopy whose pathology report contains one of the keyword phrases sessile serrated or tubular adenoma. And so those terms were identified by working with folks from FORTE and coordinators to identify, these phrases that are most able to kind of highlight patients who may have one of these qualifying findings. And then we apply some additional exclusion criteria to that sample. So specifically, we filter out patients with prior treatment for lung or prostate cancer, because we know that patients for FORTE cannot have a prior history of cancer. And looking at treatment is a little bit better and more accurate than just looking at ICD codes. And we kind of focused on lung and prostate cancer treatment because those are the most common cancers within our sample and the ones that we have a good sense of what the treatments are for them. And then after that, we also restrict to patients that meet the age criteria, so age 45 to 70. So again, this is kind of looking at patients who've already had a colonoscopy that indicates they may have one of these findings that would make them eligible for the study. And then the other pathway is that given that these findings are relatively rare, we also may want to be able to identify patients that are coming in for an upcoming colonoscopy soon. So specifically, we look for patients with appointments scheduled in the next 40 days. So coordinators can proactively kind of look at those patients and follow up to see if they end up having one of these findings that would make them eligible. Then we also apply the same filters, no treatment for lung or prostate cancer, and age 45 to 70. So both of these kind of groups of patients will end up in the search or in the app. And then I also just wanted to highlight who is not excluded from the FORTE search. So unfortunately, we're not able to, go through and identify every single inclusion and exclusion criteria and generate a list of patients that are perfectly eligible. And so we wanted to be able to cast a net that's like wide enough to capture everyone that is potentially eligible, but still narrow enough that we're not overwhelming you with an infinite list of patients that's just too impossible to go through. We did look at some other exclusion criteria, but some of them were hard to accurately identify in a systematic way. So specifically, we had looked at, conditions like IBS, and we found that when using kind of a general ICD code approach to, excluding patients with IBS, we were actually excluding some patients that were eligible just because the nature of the electronic health record is not, someone may receive a code and then maybe it changes later, maybe it's not really active. So we ultimately have decided on kind of that previous list of criteria as a good place where hopefully we're getting, like I said, all of the potentially eligible patients without throwing in too many people that are definitely not eligible. And so with that context, I'll go ahead and show you what the app looks like. So for those of you who, if anyone here is familiar with our MPACT trial matching app, you'll see that within our oncology application. So you would go to the enthrall.va.gov/oncology apps. And then if you have access to trial matching, you'll see this trial matching drop down in the top of your screen. And if you click on the little arrow here, you'll see a list of these trials that we've built these, specific searches for. And so you can click on FORTE and it will bring you to this screen here, at least for the next couple of days. And a couple of days after we release the next version of our app, you will see this screen here where you can search on some additional fields. But generally, how the search works, you can either search for a particular patient. If you know someone specific that you're looking for, you can, search on their demographic, their criteria. Or you can look for patients coming in, say, within the next 30 days. Say you want to get a list of everyone coming in the next month that you can follow up on. Or, as I said, in a few days, you'll be able to search on people with particularly pathology reports from a given time. I will follow up around what the eligibility and patient status searches mean later. But you'll see, this is what you'll see after you do the search. You'll see a table with, I've redacted the patient information here, but you would see their MRN, last name, first name, date of birth, as well as the information around them. And so because there's two different pathways for patients to end up in the search, you can identify them, which pathway they're coming from based on whether or not you see an appointment within the search results. So any patient here that you search and doesn't have an appointment, that means they've been identified as potentially eligible for the study due to a previous colonoscopy. And then if you do see an appointment listed for them, that means that they are in the search because they have an upcoming colonoscopy scheduled. And so you may want to follow up with them. And then from there, you can't see their name, but normally the name will have a hyperlink. So you can click on that patient and it will bring you to the next page, which is for the second workflow, which is screening patients. So this is what you'll see when you first click on a patient. I'll note that this is from our demo site. So the patient information here, this is a fake person. This is not real. But you'll first see here where you on the left-hand side panel, you'll see the eligibility criteria. And it will list actually, if you go scroll past this, were to scroll past this down on the left-hand side, you would see the individual questions from the trial protocol. So you can go through and see the eligibility criteria there. And then on the right-hand side panel, there's several different tabs you can click through. This first one is screening status. I'll come back to that later. And then pathology report and problem list. So for patients who have been identified as having a pathology report with one of those key phrases, sessile serrated or tubular adenoma, you will see the date of the report that we were able to extract those phrases from. Because pulling in the notes and the reports themselves is like quite a burden on our infrastructure, we are not able to pull the note itself, but we hope that by providing the date of the finding that you'll be able to go and track down that note pretty easily. I'll also note that this is our first version of this, but we plan to improve this. This is kind of a design of what the next version of this app will look like, where we also want to be able to identify the date of the corresponding colonoscopy. Currently, we're only able to identify the date of the pathology report, but we are working on being able to link that to the specific colonoscopy, and then we will be able to provide dates for both of those within the app. So that's to come. And then lastly, because as I mentioned, we're not able to provide all of the inclusion and exclusion criteria, but we wanted to be able to pull out the patient's problem list so that you may be able to easily review that and see if there's, any other indications that may make them ineligible or eligible here. So we've kind of compiled a list of some things that would be helpful for you in determining a patient's eligibility. And then once you've gone through this kind of screening workflow, the next step would be to kind of track the screening status. And so this is a bit of a conceptual diagram of what these different things may look like, and then I'll show you what it looks like specifically in the app. But generally, you generate your list of pre-screening patients, you go through them and you screen them or do that initial screening, and then you may want to kind of track where they are through the process. So say you've done their initial screening and you've determined that they're eligible, then you may need to, once they're eligible, they have to be enrolled, or they have to, decide to participate and be enrolled and randomized or decline or withdrawn. Or you may go through someone and say, okay, maybe they're not currently eligible, but I think they might be eligible in the future, or we need to double check something first. You may want to be able to mark that they are potentially eligible so you can come back to them. Or there may be people that you determine are completely ineligible. You screen them. You don't want anyone else to waste their time going through it. You don't want to see them again in the future in the app if they have another or if they're from their previous report or whatever it is, and you can mark them as ineligible. And so what that looks like, I'll go back. This is what the screening status tab looks like on that right-hand side panel of the patient page. And there are these different drop downs where you can mark, update their status based on their eligibility or their screening status, or whether you've been contacted. And you can, there's a drop down values that come here. So like eligible, potentially eligible, a few different options here. And you can also enter comments for any of these. And then if you go through that and you save it, it will show up in a table below called screening history, where you can see, and it will show who made the comment and what the status is. And so you can track that across for a patient over time. And why that's particularly helpful is if we go back to the search page, you can actually search on those patient eligibility status or patient status that you've entered in the past. So say you have patients that you had identified as potentially eligible, but that you wanted to revisit, you can go ahead and search on that within the search function. So you could go and you could select potentially eligible and search, and you would then get a list of all of the patients that you had previously indicated you or someone else who had worked on, who had looked at that patient before, had previously indicated were potentially eligible. And so we have a few planned upgrades to the app. Again, this is kind of the first version of it. And so we are always looking to continually improve our apps, and we're always interested in getting feedback from the users on how we can make the tool more useful for them. So a few things that we already have planned, as I mentioned before, is to be able to match the pathology reports to colonoscopies. So we are, actively working on being able to match those and to pull in the date of the colonoscopy, and then also allow users to search on colonoscopy dates in addition to the pathology report dates. And as we also, in a couple of days, you'll be able to search on the pathology report date, but unfortunately, it's not going to show up yet in the search results table. So you'll still have to kind of click into the other tab to see the date of the pathology report. But we plan to add that to the search results table so you can easily see the date of the pathology report. And we're also going to add the patient's mailing address and phone number to their patient detail view so you can have that contact information really handy. Okay, so that's all I had planned, but I'm happy to answer any questions, or if anyone has used this or from what you've seen so far has any recommendations or suggestions to how we can improve the app, I'm happy to hear your feedback.
Thanks so much for the presentation, Caitlin. That was very informative. And yes, please, anyone who's got any comments or questions on the application, this would be a great time to jump in and learn more about this great tool for FORTE.
And if you don't think of anything now, but if you try using it and you run into something or you think of something later, feel free to send me an email or send Stephanie an email. Where, like I said, we're always looking for ways to improve the app and make the tool as useful as possible for the users.